What's up, everybody? It's JT Sports and back you guys with another video. This video I'm here with my XFL Dallas Renegades team preview. Going to be previewing the Dallas Renegades team, giving an overview of some notable players, the roster, certain players who I believe will be starting at certain positions. And I'm going to be doing these for all 8 XFL teams. So make sure that you like the video and subscribe to the channel for more XFL videos. And also make sure to hit the notification button, which is on the right side of the subscribe button, because it will alert you every time I upload a new video. So, starting off with the quarterback position. The Dallas Renegades have 2 quarterbacks on the roster as of right now. They got Landry Jones and Philip Nelson. Now, most likely Landry Jones is probably going to end up being a starter just because he has a lot of experience. He was the long-time backup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, I won't say long-term backup, but he was the backup quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers for a couple of seasons. And he has a lot of experience. And he also has played under Bob Stoops, who is the head coach of the Dallas Renegades. So he's familiar with the system, the plays, and things like that. And from what I've read, I mean, he's been pretty solid in minicamp for the Dallas Renegades. He's been providing a lot of veteran leadership to some of the younger guys on the roster. And then you got Philip Nelson. Now, Philip Nelson comes from Eastern Carolina University, a.k.a. ECU. And he's pretty solid. He has a pretty solid arm, pretty decent mobility, but he's most likely going to end up being a backup simply because Landry Jones knows the system and he has played under Bob Stoops. So that's it for the quarterback position. So now we get to the halfback position. Now, for the halfbacks, they have a pretty good group of halfbacks. You got a mix of players who have been in the NFL for a couple of seasons, and you have some younger guys. And it's not really set in stone right now who will end up being the starting halfback for the Dallas Renegades when the season begins. Based on reports, it's basically a wide open competition. Basically, all of these guys have a chance to end up being the #1 halfback for the Dallas Renegades when the XFL season kicks off. So you have Cameron Artis-Payne, who comes from the University of Auburn. Cameron Artis-Payne played for the Carolina Panthers for a season or two, I believe. And he didn't really get a lot of touches during his career for the Carolina Panthers. Now, for his career at Auburn, he was really good. He was a really solid back for the Auburn Tigers during his years playing for them. The thing with Cameron Artis-Payne is that he doesn't really have explosive getaway speed, but he's a halfback who can give you the tough yards, who can give you those 3 or 4 yards, those tough runs up the middle. Then you have Lance Dunbar. Lance Dunbar, out of the University of North Texas, is also a guy who has a little bit of NFL experience as well. And Lance Dunbar, man, he's a very good one-cut back. He can make a lot of shifty plays in the middle of the field to make a lot of guys miss in the open field and things like that. Do you have Dimitri Flowers, who comes from Oklahoma University? You have Darnell Holland, who comes from Kennesaw State. Then you also have Austin Walter out of Rice University. Now, Austin Walter is a really underrated player that you guys should look out for, because I believe Austin Walter spent a little bit of time with the San Francisco 49ers and their training camp in the preseason. And I was actually really surprised that he didn't end up getting a roster spot for the 49ers, because he had a really nice preseason. From what I was reading about him in the offseason for the 49ers, he ended up having a pretty nice camp. So the fact that he didn't end up making a roster was pretty surprising to me, because a lot of 49er fans and a lot of people who at the 49ers training camps and mini camps and things like that, they were raving about how good Austin Walter was. So I was really surprised to see that he didn't make the 49ers roster. So I think he's also a dark horse who could end up being the starting halfback on this Dallas Renegades team. Then also you got Marquise Young, who comes from University of Massachusetts. So now when we get into the wide receivers, now the wide receiver position is a little bit more set in stone. Now, for the wide receiver position, you got Floyd Allen, who comes from Ole Miss University. Then you got Jeff Badgett, who comes from Oklahoma. Now, this guy had a very good minicamp. He's most likely going to end up being the Dallas Renegades' #1 wide receiver. Then you got Stacy Coley, who comes from the University of Miami. He's a speed guy. I pretty much like him better in the slot than I do as an outside wide receiver. I think he has potential to be a pretty good slot receiver for the Dallas Renegades if he does end up getting that opportunity to start at that slot receiver for the Dallas Renegades. Now, Stacy Coley is a guy who was had a brief stint with the Minnesota Vikings a season or two ago. So, I mean, Stacey Coley, man, he's a very good route runner. Also has very good speed as well. The thing with him is it comes to consistency when it comes to catching the football. Kind of had a couple of drop passes during his time, his short tenure with the Minnesota Vikings. So that's going to be something to watch. But I think he should end up being one of the starting wide receivers when their XFL season kicks off for the Dallas Renegades. Now, you also got Joshua Crockett out of Central Oklahoma. You got Stephen Dunbar out of Houston. He had a pretty nice career during his time for Houston. You got Jazz Ferguson out of Northwestern State. Then you got Gerard Hurd out of Texas University. Then you got Keith Mumphrey out of Michigan State University. You got Flynn Nigel out of Northwestern. Then you got Carl Whitley out of Auburn Christian University. Now for the tight ends, you got Romulo Brooker, who comes from Houston University. Then you got Donald Perham, who comes from Stetson University. Now, Donald has had a pretty good minicamp. He has great hands, great size. I mean, this guy is 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan. And from the reports I've read, I mean, this guy had a very good minicamp. I mean, he was making a lot of big athletic plays, one-hand catches, athletic catches, tiptoe catches and things like that. So this guy is very athletic. And I mean, look, this guy is 6'8". And he has a 7-foot wingspan. So the Dallas Renegades are definitely going to find a way to incorporate him in their offense. I mean, it's absolutely no way you can't find a way to incorporate this guy. I mean, he's 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan, and he's very athletic and has great hands as well. So I'm expecting him to probably be their number 2 option when it comes to their passing game, just because of the size. I mean, he's going to be a good downfield threat, and I'm not expecting, if this guy has a pretty good season, like what I'm expecting him to have, I don't think he's going to be playing in the XFL for very long. I think he'll probably be on the NFL roster come next year, because this guy is 6'8", and he has a 7-foot wingspan. The last tight end that they have on the roster, they have Sean Price out of University of South Florida. So now we get into the offensive linemen that the Dallas Renegades have on their roster. And again, like the halfback position, it's not really set in stone who are going to be the starters for the offensive linemen. But when we get into the offensive guards, they got Josh Allen, who comes from the University of Louisiana Monroe. You got Ani, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but he comes from Iowa State. Then you got Marquise Shakir, who comes from Mid-Tennessee State. Then you got Shalasi Ufatafi, who comes from Utah University. Now, when we look at the offensive tackles that the Dallas Renegades have on their roster, they got Justin Evans, who comes from South Carolina State. He was really solid when he was playing for South Carolina State. Had a very good career there. You got Darius James, who comes from the University of Auburn. You got Patrick Lawrence, who comes from Baylor University. And Pace Murphy, who comes from Northwestern State University. So, at the defensive end position, you got Frank Alexander. Frank Alexander had a very good career when he was playing for the Oklahoma Sooners. You got Jonathan Calvin, who comes from Mississippi State. You got James Folston, who comes from Pitt. Then you got Marcus Jones, who I believe they just traded for, I believe. He comes from Angelo State. This guy had like 16.5 sacks, 11.5 tackles for loss during his 2018 campaign for Angelo State University. Then you got Joe Rivers from Mississippi State. And now we get to the defensive tackles that they have on their roster. The defensive tackles, not really a lot of notable names here. They have a lot of defensive tackles, but not really a lot of names who pop out to you. A lot of these guys haven't really had out the raw kind of production. When I look at their stats and kind of look at a little bit of their tape, you got Richard Ash, who comes from Western Michigan University. You got Winston Craig, who comes from Richmond. You got Tony Gerald, who comes from UCF, Nick James from Mississippi State University, Isaiah Lunsford from Bowling Green, you got Glenn Robinson from Purdue, you got Deion Simmons, and you got Terrell Thompson from Charleston State University. So now, looking at the linebacker position that they have, you got Ashante Brown from Western Michigan. You got Rashard Client from USF. You got Ray Davidson, who had a really good career during his time playing for Cal. You got Greg Martinez from Notre Dame. You got Jonathan Massaquoi from Troy University. Veteran leadership there. I think he has been around in the NFL for a couple of years. You got Trey Watson, who had a very good career for Maryland. So, I mean, they have some talented guys, some veterans at that linebacker position. Now we get into the cornerback position. The cornerback position is also something that isn't really set in stone yet. You got Tenny Adewase from Delaware State. You got Dontelio Brown from Valdosta State University, who was the Division II champions back in 2018. You got Josh Hawkins from ECU, Eastern Carolina University. Jamal Peters from Mississippi State, and you got Deshaun Phillips, and you got Josh Thornton, who was the starting safety for South Utah. So the cornerback position isn't really set in stone. Don't really know a lot about the cornerbacks, so that's still set to be decided who will end up being the starters there. Then at safety position, you got Michael Abernathy, who comes from the University of Tennessee. Pretty solid when he was a starter there for Tennessee. You got Marlon Evans from Utah State. You got Jalen Harvey from Arizona State. You got Ronald Martin from LSU. And you got Darren Smith from Fresno State. So those are just some of the safeties. Then for special teams, you got kickers and punters. You got kicker Austin McGinnis, who comes from the University of Kentucky, and Drew Gotts, who comes from Baylor University. So this is it for the XFL Dallas Renegades team preview for the 2020 XFL season. So let me know about some notable guys that you see on this roster, who you think will end up having the biggest impact at whatever position for the Dallas Renegades. And make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more XFL videos. And thanks for watching.